Welcome. Sorry for the slightly delayed start. Let's get cracking. So, welcome to this Systemise and Scale workshop with a funky bit of step too far, too early. All right, so this workshop is going to be very, very rapidly paced. It's going to have two fundamental principles that overlay on the top. Number one, I believe that right now is the best time, hands down, to be an entrepreneur, to be a business owner. Here's why. I think there is significant disruption going on in the marketplace. Massive disruption. And yet, the marketplace is awash with cash. There's more cash in business bank accounts right now than there's been at any time in human history. And those two things combined, capital along with massive market disruption, creates opportunities for entrepreneurs. I think that the incumbents who refuse to adapt will struggle and many will die and fail. I think it's pretty universally believed that there's going to be record-breaking corporate failure rate in the coming months. And that's where the opportunity is for small business owners. Those that can adapt and can incorporate the skills required to position themselves in the new environment we're finding ourselves in can thrive. And that's why we're here. We're going to talk about, okay, what has to happen in order to do that? And that ties in nicely with the second point, which is, I believe, it's easier to run a company at £5 million revenue than it is £500,000 revenue. And that's really a metaphor, because there's people of all shapes and sizes of revenues in here. In our mastermind programs, we have businesses between low six figures all the way up to 30 million sterling plus revenues. And at scale, there is more infrastructure. At scale, there is, generally speaking, more capital resources. The hardest bit is breaking through the metaphorical ceiling at probably high six, low seven-figure revenues when the company's dependent on who? Who's the business typically dependent on when it's six-figure revenues, low seven-figure revenues? The owner, the business owner. And yet, there's not enough money to be able to make the hires, to be able to have the management team in place, to be able to free the business owner up. That's one of several problems that we're here to solve. Okay? We're going to talk about a variety of different business areas, but you'll see, and we'll go around the room throughout the 2 days, that there's only so many. There's kind of like the dirty half dozen or so business problems, almost regardless of size. So we are going to do this. Previously was a 2-day workshop that we're condensing into a day. So we're going to go at a rate of knots, and we're going to talk about marketing. We're going to talk about sales. We're going to talk about operations. We're going to talk about the legal side of things. We're going to talk about recruitment. We're going to talk about finance. And there's something else that I've missed. But we're going to cover it all. The purpose is to give you oversight into key principles and strategies. I know a good number in this room are already in the mastermind programs, albeit most of you are in your first year. These are kind of like the cornerstones, the fundamental pieces, if you will, with which we play in order to allow us to scale. So, with all that said, if you open your workbooks to page number 3, I just want you to jot down your answers to these 3 questions, and then we will share and discuss socially distanced, I guess. So the 3 questions are, why did you invest your time and money to come here? Right, because there was money spent to be here, but more importantly, there was time, and time is finite. So what is it that you're really looking to get from this workshop? Question number 2, what are your top 3 biggest frustrations in your business right now? And that kind of leads up to question number 3, which is, what would have to happen, Laura, for you to be able to look back at the end of this workshop and say, wow, that was the best business training I ever attended? So 3 questions. I typically give you 5 to 10 minutes, but we're going at pace today. So 3 minutes, just write faster. 3 minutes just to jot down your answers to those 3 questions, and then we'll share and discuss. Away we go. Okay. And stop there. And just before we go into kind of a first exercise, sharing with other people, I know that's something you may not have done for 6 months or so. Just to cover off ground rules. Look, I'm sure different people in this room, as reflected in society, have got different opinions about the whole COVID safe thing. So we ask that you just be respectful and just keep your distance. So I'm probably going to suggest that you just talk from a distance. So what we need to do is just discuss your answers to those questions, and the way that I'd suggest that you divide it up is you three on the top row together, you pair together, you pair together, you three together, probably three here, and then a three there, probably. If you could just, 2 minutes, quickly just sharing your answers to those questions, that would be great. Okay, come on back. So, I'd love to get a few samples. Who would like to share what their outcomes are from this workshop? Who would like to go first? Don't be shy. Don't flood me all at once.
Basically, to learn the necessary.
Actually, first of all, Obi, just tell the group who you are and what your business does first.
So, my name's Obi. I run a personal training studio or two in London. And yeah, my main objective is really just to learn how to free up my time to be able to do the sort of higher leverage tasks like management and leadership.
Good, like that, good. Who else in here is looking to free up their time to do higher leverage tasks? Good. Right, just you, Obi. Yeah, good. Somebody else. Who else would like to share? Who else would like to share? Yeah, go ahead. Tell us who you are and what your business does.
So my name is Sam, and our business is a self-development company and training company for women. And three of the biggest things to get out of today. We're at that exact point you described, that pivot of the owner needing to work on the business, not in it, but the finances to their scale as quickly as we'd like.
Right.
So there, which means that our current team are doing a lot and wanting to manage their time. So it's that balancing act. And we have started some systemisation, but it's very much easier to see. So we need to.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sam. And forgive me, you did tell me before, but I've forgotten how many are on the team at the moment.
10.
10. Okay. All right. Good. Good. Very good. Somebody else. Who else would like to share? Yeah, Jeremy.
Jeremy. My business is e-commerce fulfillment, which effectively is supporting online retailers with the physical warehousing side of online. Very similar to everyone else, really trying to remove myself from the day-to-day business. Another aspect that I really want to look at is scaling profitably. We've scaled very quickly. E-com obviously has gone through a bit of an uplift with last sort of 5 months or so, and doing that on low margins profitably can be quite challenging.
Very good. Very good. Who here? Well, not good that you've scaled and it's been challenging and not profitable, but good in terms of the awareness. Who here has had in the past, maybe not right now, but in the past they've grown, but in growing somehow their profits have managed to decrease or go down? Show of hands. Okay, good. Again, not good, but good that you're aware of it. So we're definitely going to hit that one head on early this afternoon, Jeremy. Very good. And finally?
My name's Ryan. I run a music academy, so we do a lot of music lessons at a music school. The main thing is to have a reliable system for onboarding and training our staff and being able to track the results of what they've been doing in a more number-based format.
Yes, yes. And are you guys, because when we last spoke it was a couple of years ago, as I remember, are you guys back face-to-face? Is it virtual now?
We're still all online at the moment.
Okay.
In the next couple of months. A lot of the schools that we work with have said they've got to get this first half term on the way.
Good. So what's the yeah, I understand that, right? So what's the most important, the single most important question you'd like to get answered from this workshop?
It's just it's kind of taking on people that are going to support the business and help us. It's the system of bringing people on. You know, what would be a good way to go about that rather than me just guessing. And then it's another side of it is having someone that we're going to bring on board to actually help build that side of the business and grow it.
All right, very good. Very good. Thank you, Ryan. So thank you, everyone. So there's a lot of stuff to cover. So let's get cracking. So the first thing that I'm going to begin with is an overview, if you like, a simple model that I use. The way that I would describe it is every single one of us in here is invested in our companies, Abraham. We're investing our time, energy, and money, our capital. The question is, what's going to give us the best return on investment? So the way that I look at things is I've got a 10-step checklist, Alan, that I use in order to try and calibrate if I can maximize, how do I maximize the value in that business? What do I need to do in order to improve the value if it was to be sold on the open marketplace? And I'm going to cover this as a recap for most of you probably first, because it sets a bit of a framework for the day. And the rest of the day, we go into much more depth into each individual area. So in order to do this, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. If you don't know the answer, just ask yourself, what would the average small business owner do? Choose the exact opposite, and you'll be correct. Okay? Now, a couple of laughs there, probably laughs of recognition, but in reality, it's because most business owners are flat out broke. Right? Most business owners are struggling. Most business owners are working for less than the minimum wage if they prorated themselves on an hourly rate basis. So what the masses do is inherently wrong. So if you don't have a strategy, in absence of a strategy, just observe the masses and do the opposite, and you'll probably be further ahead. I mean, it's true in business, but it's probably also true in life, okay? So, if I'm playing the game of business and I want to maximize the value that this asset, this company has to me, there's fundamentally two variables, okay? So the value is a component of two factors. What are those two factors? This is on page number 4, by the way. What are those two factors? Profit. Yeah, so the profit, how much money does the business make for the shareholders? And that's multiplied by another variable. Profit times a multiple. Okay, so businesses at the most simplistic level will sell for a multiple of their pre-tax earnings. Okay? So these are the two factors which drive how much your business will be worth. How much money does it make? And then the multiple. And the multiple, Obi, is a proxy for how reliable, predictable, and sustainable those profits are. I.e., if we had 3 gyms that we were looking to buy, okay, and they all had the same amount of profit, okay, they all had £100,000 in profit, one of which was pay-as-you-go, one of which was pay monthly, but you could cancel at any time, and one of which all the members were in 12-month contract. Which of those businesses, A, B, or C, would be the most valuable? C, obviously. Why? Because it's more reliable, predictable, and sustainable. The least valuable would be A, because it's pay-as-you-go, and it could be gyms, but also think of most retail, right? As in they don't know, every month they restart the sales ledger at 0, and they've got no certainty whatsoever. So inherently, it's more unstable, less certainty for an investor, so a lower multiple. So if we want a company that's worth more money, and by the way, some of you are sat here saying, Dan, I'm not trying to build my company for exit. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, Mike, if you're trying to build your company for exit, because if you're not looking to sell your company, you've just bought your company for another year. You're invested in that company for another year. So you owe it to yourself to maximize your return on investment. And ultimately, one of the key limiters on value is how dependent the business is on you. Inversely, the less company is dependent on you, probably the more valuable it is, all other things being equal. Okay? So with these two variables, Steve, profit times by multiple, if I said we could only focus exclusively, Josh, on one of these two multiples, which one do you think most small business owners would want to focus on? The profit or the multiple? Profit. They want to focus on the profit. And therefore, I'm telling you right now, that's wrong. The first place we want to talk about is how do we drive the multiple. Step one. So this checklist that I'm going to give you, which, by the way, I must confess I was a bit tardy. Last time I did this workshop, there was only 6 steps to this. It says in your workbook 6. There's 10. You're getting a bonus 4 just for turning up today. Okay? So there's 10, and they're in rank order. They're in rank order in the sense of bang for buck. Doesn't mean you have to do them, Laura, in this order, 1 to 10, but it's kind of like if you're checking them off. If you've only got so much capital or time, you'd look in pot 1 first, then pot 2, then pot 3, right? In terms of bang for buck, return on your investment. So, multiple is first. A different way of thinking about the multiple, or how do you improve the multiple, is risk mitigation. Risk mitigation. In other words, I said a moment ago, and it's the box in the top right, I'll do the arrows first. So in the box, it's kind of in the mid-right, immediately below multiple. It's the 1, 2, and 3 is how reliable, predictable, and sustainable those profits are. And the multiple, the arrows, the multiple is adjusted downwards for risk and upwards for growth. So the down arrow is what we were talking about with Obi a minute ago. Because it's less risky if you've got a business where all the members are on long-term contracts, right? Because their income and thus the profits are more predictable and sustainable. So the lower, the higher risk your business, the lower the multiple is going to be. And also, if your business is growing, if you have the same 3 gyms and they all have the same business model, but one of them had gone down in profits the last 3 years and the other one had gone upwards for the last 3 years, even though they've got the same profit today, the one that's growing upwards would have a higher multiple. Because whatever's happening, whatever's causing that, would be seen to be more worthy if I was buying it as an outside investor. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay? So that's step number 1 in the, not 6, 10 steps of business value maximization is risk mitigation. Now, Grace, there's multiple different categories for risk. Multiple different categories, but let's just talk about one, okay, in the interest of time. Single points of failure. 1 is the worst number in business. Abraham, if you've got 1 of anything, what inevitably happens? It breaks. And when does it break? Always at the pivotal time. Right? If you've only got 1 merchant account, if you've only got 1 salesperson, if you've only got 1 marketing lead source, if you've only got 1 effective advertising campaign, doesn't matter what it is, single point of failure breaks, the whole system breaks. And your business is only as strong as its weakest link. Wherever your business is the strongest is not what's going to cause the business to fail and struggle. It's where's the weak link? Where is the Achilles heel in your business? So, I know we dive deep at this point, but just know that it's the risk that you don't see, Rachel, is what's going to sink the ship. It's the risk that you've not foreseen that's going to cause the problem. Or you've seen it, but you've underestimated the severity if it does hit. Okay? So I spend a lot of time thinking about what's going to screw this up, what's going to disrupt this, what's going to cause upheaval in this business, in the area. What could go wrong? Not because I get emotionally distraught about it, just because I call it being positively paranoid. I want this thing to be as robust as anything. I want it to be bulletproof. Okay, so that's step number 1, risk mitigation. Okay. So, on this first layer, we go to this side first. I love it. I'm just taking this brand new out of the packet and it doesn't work. So step number 1 is risk mitigation. Okay? When it comes to increasing profit, and I'll try and draw it the same way that you've got it over here. Yeah, okay. There's only 2 ways of increasing profit. Business 101, but we sometimes forget the fundamentals, Georgia. What are the 2 ways that we can increase profit? We can decrease expenses. You sound like somebody that's had that drummed into you, Steve. You can decrease expenses, or you can increase sales, revenue, turnover. Okay? If you're asking most small business owners, Lisa, you can increase revenue. We want to grow your profits. We can either focus on increasing your revenue or we can reduce your costs. Where do most small business owners want to focus? Sales. And therefore, where do you want to focus? Expenses. Right? Because in terms of bang for buck, if you've got a business that's got, let's just say $1 million in revenue and 200,000 in profit, therefore it's got 800,000 in expenses. If you're able to cut those expenses by, 12.5%, okay, so 100 grand. If you're able to cut that, where does that money go? It goes straight to the bottom line. As long as it doesn't cannibalize sales, it's going to go straight to the bottom line. And you're going to have increased, so a 12.5% cut here equals a 50% growth in profits. Now, am I saying don't invest in your company's growth? No, of course not. Your company needs investment for growth. Your company is not going to be able to produce 10x the output with the same infrastructure. Exceptionally unlikely. The question is, how do you cut unnecessary expenses so you can reinvest more heavily in the areas that give you the return? And if you're sat in this room and you don't have, in fact, let's do it for fun. Who in here could, if asked, trot out a budget for the next 12 months? Okay, good handful. Mastermind members, good. Who could trot out a cash flow forecast? Okay, good. And who has, I'll say this broadly, who has clear financial controls, as in you're clear about who controls the bank account, how it's done, how cash moves, etc. Okay, good. If you don't have those three things in place, and by the way, this room is so disproportionate from what's normally out there, it's ridiculous. In fact, that's the highest compliance I've ever seen, pretty much. But if you don't have those things, I'm going to tell you hands down, at least 10% of your expenditure, Obi, is being wasted. If you're not really militant and on top of this stuff, at least 10% of your expenditure is being wasted, which means that it's either Alan not being dividended to you, it's not able to be dividended to you because it's not showing as bottom line profit, or it's impeding your long-term growth, Sam, because it's not able to be reinvested. And therefore the business owners sit there and go, we haven't got the money to grow. We haven't got the money to grow. We can't self-fund our growth. And then inevitably, what do? They try and borrow the money to be able to grow, and they invest it just as inefficiently as the original money that was there, right? So they scale the inefficiencies. And at some point, it topples over, right? So it's not sexy, but it sure as hell makes a lot of money. So number 2 is reducing expense ratios. Number 2 is reducing expense ratios. All right, so we've spoken about at the first level, increasing the profit first, risk mitigation, the 6 categories, but we just spoke about single points of failure. What are single points of failure, which we'll talk about later over today, Abraham, and then we're going to say, okay, what can we do to improve that, Mike? Number 2, reducing expense ratios. We're going to talk about that just after lunch. We're going to talk more about the financial elements and financial controls. You're not going to get profitable because you grow. If you get profitable and get tight financial controls, you will then be able to grow. Okay? Most people try and put the cart before the horse. So now let's go the next layer down. So if we're trying to grow our revenues, we can either get new customers or we can keep the customers that we've already got. Which of those two do most small business owners want to do? Do they want to get, Alex, or do they want to keep? Yeah, they want to get new ones. Okay? So what do we want to do, Christian? We want to keep. Yeah, we want to keep. We want to keep the ones that we've got. Okay? We want to keep the ones we've got. And this is where there's a deviation from your workbook. So I best not get it wrong. All these 10 steps begin with the letter R. So step number 3 is retain. It's retention of existing clients. Okay, retention of existing clients. I'll do these 3 together in quick succession. So there's retain, there's repeat, and there's reactivate. Retain, repeat, Rachel, and reactivate. So let's talk about the definitions and how they're different. Retention is about not losing, Georgia. It's about not losing. And this is the one that most people overlook. You know why, Rachel? We're in love with our own baby. We think, because we're the owner and we designed it, it's beautiful, it's perfect, what could possibly be wrong with this thing? In fact, that's part of our job. Our job is to sell the vision of the company and how magnificent it is to our employees, to customers, to suppliers. But that means that we often can't see our own blind spot, right? Of how Carl can we improve it, right? How do we improve it? And William, have you ever had? I'm sure we've spoken about this before. Have you ever had the joy of mystery shopping your own business? Okay. Anybody in here mystery shop their own business? Okay. If you've got a strong stomach. You may have to get a friend to do it, ring up and pretend to be prospect, or pretend to even be a customer and buy and try and go through customer service, and just be prepared to be horrified by what you see. Because in practice, when people tell me that they've done that, it's nearly always a very negative experience, because you've laid out this process, but somehow it's not being executed effectively. And you know this, Jeremy, best, especially in your industry, execution is strategy. If you've got a process, doesn't matter how clear the damn process is in your head, Grace, if it's not being done, it falls over. And yet most of us walk around with blinkers on, Josh, and it's not being complied to. How do we fix that culturally? That's something that we're also going to talk about. Because it could be a training issue, or it could just be that the people don't give a shit. Right? How do we address that? So that's retention. Repeat is about how do you proactively, Rob, stimulate new. How do you stimulate new? How do you stimulate additional purchases, Phil? And finally, reactivation. So reactivation is how do you get the people that have left to come back on board? People that have drifted away. And all of these are infinitely more easier and easier to be more profitable than going and getting new. Why? Why is retention, repeat purchases and reactivations more profitable than going and getting new clients? Yeah, because, well, why does it cost more to go and get new, Alan?
Advertising, marketing.
Right, because you've got the advertising spend required to get them. And from a human psychology point of view, said differently, these people already know you exist, they hopefully like you to make purchase in the first place, and they trust you because you gave them a good service. So what that means is if the customer costs you less, they will be more profitable. And for most, not all, but most of the businesses in here, additional purchases are of higher value than the initial purchase. Okay, some business models you have a big initial purchase and then that's it, but for probably most, as I understand it, of the businesses in here, actually the value is in the lifetime value of the client. Okay, so if the customers are spending more and they're costing you less, they are multiplied, they are compounded in terms of their profitability. Does that make sense? No? Yes? Yes? Okay, good. So that's steps 3, 4, and 5. Retain, repeat, reactivate. So the question, Laura, you want to be asking yourself is, okay, how can I improve my retention? What do I need to do to increase the repeat purchases? And who are the people that I need to reactivate, for example? Now, in order to be able to do any of these things, Georgia, you need to have some way of measuring it. If you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. And that's exactly what most small business owners do, Lisa. They just wander around blindly with ideas in their head. Okay? Do I tell this story now? This is exactly the kind of thing where I need to not do it, otherwise we'll run along. So I'll pause it for now. Okay? So that's retain, repeat, reactivate. Okay? So that's this level of the model. So now let's talk about getting new clients. And again, we're now in the point where it's going to deviate slightly from your workbook. That's okay, so tell me if you get completely lost. But as a recap so far, you've got you've got risk mitigation, you've got reducing expense ratios, you've got retention, you've got repeat, reactivate. 2, 3, 4, 5. 3, 4, 5. When it comes to getting new customers or getting new revenue, you can either increase the number of customers that you've got, or you can increase the average order value or transaction size. Which of those two is easier? Increasing the number of customers or increasing the average order value? Order value, why? Because you already have them. So metaphorically, if you have a supermarket, you can either get new people to come to your supermarket for the first time, or you can get people who are already in there to spend more money by either putting more items in their trolley or more expensive items in their trolley, because they've already got a need, i.e. they're hungry. That's why they're in the supermarket. They already know you exist. They know you, like you, trust you. Okay, and they have the means to pay, hopefully. Either that or they're just shoplifting. Okay, so I thought that was quite funny, but whatever. So raising average order value is number 6. Now, we're not going to go into depth because, again, this is just teasing up ahead of the rest of today. But for some of you, that's where the lowest hanging fruit is. Okay. So now when we come on over to the increasing the number of customers, typically, here's a principle that's useful. It's nearly always for established businesses. This is why this workshop's not for startups. For established businesses, it's nearly always, Rachel, more lucrative to optimize what you've got than try and innovate. Okay, but that goes counter to what we think. And that's part of the lesson from being here, Carl, is the mindset of a business that is scaling is different than the mindset that got you to start up. It requires different skills, it requires different thinking. If you constantly try and innovate, which is all you've got to do when you're brand new starting up, you've got to try loads of things that don't work, throw it out, try again. But once you get established, you need to build on that foundation. So optimizing what you've got is less sexy, but is typically more lucrative. So you want to ramp the conversion rate. So number 7 is how do you increase the number of customers? You want to ramp the conversion rate. I'm just putting ramp CR, ramp the conversion rate. In other words, the number of leads that you get, Abraham, convert to customers at a certain rate. Okay, by optimizing that sales process, that sales funnel, typically yields much more because you've already had the marketing spend. You've already had the marketing spend, Obi. So what can we do just to make a high percentage of those people buy? Better systems, processes, again, going to talk about this after lunch, I think. Better systems, better processes before lunch to optimize that process, okay, regardless of who in the team's executing upon it. Ramping the conversion rate. So that's step number 7. Okay, so we've got a few to go now. So down into the last 3. And you'll notice as we get down this list, you'll find yourself becoming more interested than you were higher up on the list. The ideas become more interesting and innovative, but that does not mean better. Okay, I just want to emphasize this list is weighted. For most of you, we could spend all day just talking about number 1 and make your business infinitely more profitable and more lucrative and more valuable and less stressful on you just by mitigating the risks and perhaps getting the expenses under control. Okay, but down here, number 8. If you want to increase the number of customers, are all customers created equal? Yes or no? No, absolutely not. If you did some kind of regressive analysis, you'd probably see the Pareto principle applies. What's the Pareto principle? 80-20 rule. Okay, so not all customers are equal, and yet we often market to them as they are. So the metaphor would be, if somebody was typically their whole life they've only ever flown economy, I really can't do plane-based metaphors in the current climate, but what the hell, I'll persevere. And they've only ever flown economy, and they want to fly from here to New York. Okay? What's going to be one of their key factors that they decide as to which airline to fly with? Cost, price. Okay, so they're going to go and have a look, and then they're going to go, okay, effectively, who's the cheapest? I'm only going from here, Birmingham or London, to New York. Who's the cheapest? However, if somebody, their whole life, they've only ever flown business or first class, and they were trying to get from here to America, what factors might they choose in order to decide which airline to fly with?
Extras, that sort of thing, what you get with the service.
Okay, what extras? Who's got the better service? Who's got the best lounge? The fastest flight, the one that fits in best with your schedule, right? So there could be many factors, but the one thing that it's certainly significantly less emphasis on is what? Price, cost. And so the desires that drive the purchase for those two customers are very different, and yet we try and market to them in the same way. In fact, the marketing that attracts the first class customer the economy customer will probably turn off the first class customer. I've got a good friend of mine whose nearest airport is kind of a Ryanair hub, and he will quite happily, consciously drive 60 minutes past there to get to Heathrow just so he can go with a different airline, because he detests them that strongly. Okay? Because he wants the lounges, he wants the service. Okay? So, number 8 is reaching ideal or dream clients. I'm just going to put reach ideal down here for now. Reaching ideal. But most people haven't even defined that. They haven't even defined that. Or worse, Rachel, they think that they're first class, but actually everybody else looking at them can see that they're economy class. Right? And the business owner will say, oh, I can't charge more money, I can't, because the marketplace won't bear it. No, the pond in which you're currently fishing might not be able to bear it. All right? So it's more innovative, but doesn't mean that it's not a whole new world potentially out there. So that's step number 8. Number 9, okay. The best customers, as we've already spoken about, Josh, are ones who spend the most but cost you the least. If you went back and looked and really analysed, Phil, if you analyse all the customers that you've had in their original lead source, there's one particular lead source that converts more quickly, converts at a higher rate, has a higher repeat purchase rate, has a higher referral rate and lower complaints and refunds. What is that lead source? Referrals. Okay, referrals typically will be a much higher quality customer than somebody that's coming via cold traffic. Who here knows that's true in their business? Show of hands. Okay, good. So if that's true, those customers are often worth 2, 3, 5, 10 times more in lifetime profit contribution to the business than customers that have come via cold traffic. Okay, who in here has a system to maximize the number of referrals that they generate? Show of hands? Show of hand? Okay, so all right, so what that tells you, for everybody in this room, is there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity right there. How might you leverage that? And most businesses are going to go, oh, I can't do that, because I want scale. I want massive scale. All right, well, it's a hell of a lot easier to scale if every customer you're worth is worth £1,000 than £100. Right? Optimize with the low-hanging fruit. We go out there hunting for gold, ignoring all the gold coins that are scattered around our feet that we could get via referrals from our existing client base if we just solve that problem. And that would provide the capital input, perhaps, which would allow us to test some of the more risky marketing schemes. Nobody's saying you don't have to do paid traffic. Nobody's saying don't invest in marketing. Just in terms of bang for buck return on investment, we sometimes wait our time, energy, and money in the wrong areas. Does that make sense? Okay? So that's number 9. So before I do number 10, the recap. Risk mitigation. De-risk your business. De-risked is low stress. Reducing expense ratios. You're going to have tight monetary controls. If you're not on top of that, you will struggle to scale. Then retain, repeat, reactivate, all to do with keeping your existing clients. So the first three steps are about getting a good defense. There's no point, to use a football metaphor, there's no point scoring 2 goals at one end if you concede 6 at the other end. Okay, you need to have a good defense first. Then you need to develop your core business. Okay, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Develop your core business by reactivate, raising average order value, and ramping the conversion rate. Okay. If you've got those things in order, you will have a profitable business that's growing organically. If you want really compounded leverage growth, which I'm sure you all do, otherwise you wouldn't be here, it's just you've got to get the order right. The last 3 are the most disruptive. So reaching the ideal clients, the kind of referral systems, how do you make that process work and slick? And then finally, number 10. Number 10 has made me more money than the other 9 combined. It's made me personally many, 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 many millions. But it's also, Jeremy, cost me many, many, many millions. I've been sued for many, many, many millions. So I just want to caveat this before you get excited, because it's a hot topic at the moment, especially in the current climate. And number 10 is roll-ups. And roll-ups is a mergers and acquisitions term for if you put one or more companies together, you typically have synergies. You have cost synergies, Obi, so it's more efficient because if you have one gym, it's hard to justify hiring a marketing person for that one location, that one PT studio. But if you have 5 studios, it's far easier to justify that cost because that same person can do the same marketing for all 5 locations. Okay, so you have cost synergies, so your costs can go down, so 1 + 1 can equal 3 in profit terms. But you also often have revenue synergies, where companies A's products can be sold to company B's customers and vice versa. Okay, so you can build on some of that value that's been established in those businesses. So number 10 is roll-ups. Roll-ups. So this is the checklist for business value maximization. Okay, and we've only done it at speed, but it's worth diving into and doing the analysis for us. So here's my metaphor. Okay, this summer I was feeling a little bit unwell. I was feeling a bit run down, etc. So I went and I got a load of blood tests done. And just recently I got the blood tests back. And I like to think that I take care of myself. I invest in my own health and well-being quite heavily. Not that you can necessarily tell, but I do. And I was like, what's going on? So I tried all the kind of common sense thing, but I was still feeling just low energy. So I went and checked. And then the doctor said, oh, that's interesting. You're really deficient in B vitamins. I said, well, that's ridiculous because my diet's strong and I actually supplement with B vitamins, so that's not true. And they said, well, facts don't cease to become facts, Dan, just because you choose to ignore them. I'm like, okay, fair point. And she said, well, you might be failing to absorb those things. So here's what we're going to do. Try taking this, Within a couple of days, I felt better than I'd felt in years. Years. Here's the point. Prescription, deciding what to do without proper diagnosis is malpractice in medical terms. The same's true for your business, Sam. You deciding what to do just because you read some book without proper diagnosis of what's going on in your business is not going to get you the results. I could have tried random things from reading health books and said, oh, maybe I'm deficient in this. Maybe I need CoQ10. Oh, maybe my gut microbiome's out of whack. Maybe I need to take a lot of probiotics. I could have tried a load of those things. But it was the specific diagnosis about what's going on that allowed me to see through that, because the doctor basically said, amongst other things, the B vitamin I was taking was shit. That's a medical term, I think, Jeremy. Right? It was just not very effective and not absorbed by my body very well. So got a different one and had a completely different result. Right? So is it possible, William, as you sat in here, you've got some assumptions that I supplement with B vitamins. So that can't be the deficiency. But actually, that's exactly the problem. And unless you figure out what's actually the problem in the business, it's going to impinge on your growth. Right? It's either going to stop it or it's going to limit it. So it's going to feel like you're pushing a boulder uphill. Okay. So I've just kind of give you an overview, a guideline. There's specific questions that we would ask, and in Mastermind we do ask that to kind of dive in to try and help you make the diagnosis, to try and do your blood test in these 10 areas of the business. That's business value maximization. And the rest of today, we're going to give you a variety of the different vitamins that are relevant depending on which of these areas you're deficient in. Today's really a multivitamin, or I'm doing this metaphor to death now. Okay. Any questions on business value maximization?
Can you just quickly repeat which was defence and then which was...
Yeah, the first three are defence. So risk mitigation, reducing expense ratios, and retention of existing clients. In a sense, that's about not losing. Yeah, Warren Buffett, one of the richest men on the planet, said there's 2 rules to investing in businesses. Rule number 1, don't lose money. Rule number 2, refer to rule number 1. Right, so that's defence. The next 4 are develop the core business. So repeat purchases, reactivation, raising the average order value, and ramping the conversion rate. So that's developing what already is established. That'll give you a business that's now not getting hurt and going backwards, but will grow, okay, organically. And then the last 3, reaching ideal clients, referral systems, and roll-ups. That's like a magical strategy for disruption, for significant compounded growth. Does that answer your question, Mike? Yeah. Good. Any other questions on business value maximization? All right, so turn to your little groups and turn to somebody, Georgia, because you came in after the first exercise, and just discuss. Just 3 or 4 minutes, just discuss what you got from that and how does it apply to your business. Away you go. All right, questions, learnings, discoveries about that exercise? Not allowed to go to the toilet. It's forbidden. Questions, learnings, discoveries about that exercise? Yes, Laura.
So I have one established business and one new business, and so with the established one, I can check off a lot of these things. You know, with the new one, I can't, but it just made me see opportunities. It's kind of like my own roll-up. I have systems in place in the established one that I haven't bothered to just copy and paste over
Good.
to the new one, and that's just a really easy win to do.
Good, love that. Yeah, definitely. And that's the perfect metaphor. Often when you literally roll up 2 established businesses together, you'll say, what's best practice and best practice over here? In fact, that's why, for some of you in the room, growth through acquisition is a very viable strategy, because business B, the one that you're acquiring in your hands, if you apply your best practice, if you're a more efficient operator, that business is more profitable just by it being in your hands, right? It's called accretive value. So you drive value just by acquiring the business. It will inherently be better by laying over the best processes. Good? I like that. Thanks, Laura. Anybody else? Thoughts, comments, questions? Josh?
I'm just saying to Alex, like, you could spend the whole of your business life just going through 1 to 10 and then just going back to 1 again, because by going through that process you will naturally get a bit bloated with spending money on advertising and stuff. So by the time you've got to the roll-up stage, you could just then immediately go back to number 1 again and work all the way through. So if you could just identify what the tasks were for each of those 10 steps, probably just rinse and repeat that, and you'd keep making progress.
100%. The metaphor would be, it's like going around a path going up a mountain. Okay, see, and you'll see it come up again and over today. In this room, I think we've got from low 6-figure revenues up to, I think the high in here is today is 10 million revenue. But you'll see that all the problems are the same or similar. It's looking in the same direction, but from a slightly different vantage point. Okay? And the slight extra nuances of detail. And some problems, to be fair, become more applicable at a larger size than others. Typically, the more you scale, it becomes much more people focused. Yeah, but good. Thanks, Josh. Any final comments? Go ahead, Rachel.
I was just thinking actually, I don't know if you remember you did a video jogging and you were talking about can you just keep your business trundling and growing. Because my initial thought when coronavirus hit, I thought, God, I've got to do something for the solicitor. So I thought I've got to do maybe online or webinars or business is what I was going to do. And then I saw one of your videos and it was like, oh, I'm just out jogging and we were just talking generally. And it was just, can you just keep doing what you're doing? And I thought to myself, it just seemed ridiculous, but I thought that's what I'm going to do, just keep doing what I'm doing. Instead of looking for a new type of business, new clients, just kept what I'm doing, reactivated the old clients, and I actually had my best year yet. My insurance went up, but I had my best year this year from just doing what I'm, just keeping the clients going.
Good. I love it. Well said. It often shows up as people think the grass is greener, and it's not. It's not. It can be. The question is, how do you test some of these new theories safely in a way that is not detrimental to the business? Whereas what most small business owners do, Christian, is they get frustrated, pissed off, and then they throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? And then they literally go off and do something new and cause massive disruption to what was just beginning to get traction. But it's actually the business owner, Abraham, that screws it up because we got impatient when actually it was just beginning to compound. I'm going to say this, and I suspect most people in this room can resonate. You know somebody in your industry that's making a hell of a lot more money than you are, even though their product or service is inferior to yours. Doesn't that just piss you off? Okay? And I don't know, unquestionably, but I know in practice a lot of times, some of the businesses that I know now or some kind of private clients of mine that have gone from 6-figure revenues to 7-figure profits in the few years that I've known them, fundamentally aren't that different. But they've stuck to their knitting, so to speak, and it's compounded over time. So now all of a sudden the numbers that they're posting every quarter is just, they'll jump on the line. Somebody did to me just a week or two ago and said it's ridiculous. I feel almost embarrassed to come back and go, yep, another record quarter. But it's not what they did last quarter. It's what they've done for the last 8 quarters, compounded. And now all of a sudden everything's dialed in and all these little improvements compound up over time. Right? And it's kind of it's your ego. It's the enemy within that screws you up. Okay, on that positive note, let's change tack. So one other useful framework for what you should do. So I'm literally leading here with the first 2 little bits that we're covering are all encapsulating principles. The rest of the day will be more micro-focused, Alan, onto specific areas. So I believe, Laura, there are 7 things, 7 jobs as an MD you would be unwise to delegate. Everything else, I could argue, you should delegate, but these 7 you would be unwise to do so. Okay, so I think this is page number is it? 5? Okay, 5. So you've got 7 jobs. 7 jobs, assuming that you are the MD and you've got overall control of the business. Number 1, you've got to define point A. You've got to define point A. And let's clarify what I mean. Okay, it's a little bit cliche, but that's because it's true. If you're getting a sat-nav, in order for your sat-nav to give you directions, it needs to know where you are now. Because which direction you head is relative to your destination and your current position. Here's why that's relevant. Most business owners are severely lacking in their understanding of their current position. Right? And this might show up slightly later on when we talk about financials. Okay? But if you try and execute a strategy and you are not in a place to do so, it can be more detrimental than beneficial. Make sense? And a lot of business owners are woefully ignorant of how much available cash that they've got, their cash needs for expansion as being an example of that. The right strategy at the wrong time is the wrong strategy. And it can hurt you. Okay, so we need to be clear on what that means, both financially, operationally, in terms of people, in terms of culture, what's going on in our business. Okay, we need to be really, really dialed in. And sometimes when a business owner is too ambitious for growth, they're looking too far in the future and they're not looking around them right now. I'm a fan of having a clear vision, but actually, if you're hearing, you're excited about the vision and the 10-year vision for your company, you're probably going to be much better served by focusing on this next quarter and executing upon that really, really, really well, like robustly. Because you're never going to get to the 10-year vision unless you nail this next quarter. It just becomes an excuse for, oh, in the future we're going to make millions. Right now, it's all gone to shit, but let's not talk about that. Let's just talk about the future, okay? So, defining point A. Number 2 is being really clear on point B. Let's talk about what that means. When you speak to most business owners, Steve, about what point B means, where do you want your business to go? What do they tell you? How do they answer the question? What do you want to happen with your business? They talk about revenue. If they're at 6 figures, they go, I want to get to 7 figures. If they're at 7 figures, they go, I want to get to 8 figures. Or they'll say, double my revenue. And yet, flawed strategy. Why? They don't want more revenue. They don't. What is it that they want? Profit, probably. Or what they think that revenue will give them. I'm not anti more revenue, but if you've got more revenue and therefore you've got more cost to acquire that revenue, service that revenue and costs of being in business, you've got more infrastructure, it equals more workload and probably more stress until you get your systems dialed in. Does anybody in here want to double their revenue next year if it meant that your profits were cut in half? Okay. So let's be clear about what we mean. And I don't just mean revenue, I mean cash flow, I mean marketplace positioning, I mean in terms of the number of hours that you work, I mean what kind of culture are you creating. I think it requires a degree of specificity. The health analogy would be, it's a bit like saying, okay, I weigh this much, I want to weigh this much. All right, but that's flawed if that's your only markers for health. Okay, there's 2. I'm just checking I'm not missing any more. There's 2 fitness business owners in the room. Oh, 3, sorry. Damn, I did miss one. There's 3 fitness business owners in the room. You kind of go, okay. They can tell you could weigh less, but that'd be less healthy. Right? Because is it fat? Is it muscle? Okay, and there's loads of other things that are more important to your health. Same for your business. Let's be really clear about what it means. Most business owners don't say that. They just go, give me double the revenue. Okay? You can often tell, I've developed a bit of a sense for whether or not a business is going to develop and grow by the linguistics, the language that the business owner use. And if they come in and go, yeah, I just want to grow. I want to grow. I want to double my revenue. With that tone of voice as well, fine helps. I kind of go, you know what, this is going to be painful. This is going to be painful, especially when they come up with, well, we doubled last year, so we're going to double this year. Okay, because we all know the past equals the future, right? All right, so let's be clear about what point B is, because when we're clear about where we are and where we want to be, it only then, Rachel, does it allow us to do step number 3. Which is, a strategy is about how do we overcome the obstacle that is currently in the way. If it was that easy to get from $500,000 net to $1 million net, you would have done it already. The reason you're here is because you're either not where you want to be or you're not where you want to be quickly enough. Okay, there is something that's impeding that progress. And yet we try and compensate by going, okay, I've learned this idea on a course. Let's just go and do this marketing strategy. If it doesn't address the issue, I could have gone out running all I wanted. I could have lifted weights. I could have, taken XYZ supplements. If I didn't address the specific deficiency, I either wouldn't have progressed or it would have been limited because it wasn't the relevant solution for the obstacle that I had. Make sense? Okay. So what is, rhetorical for now, what is the problem that's impeding your growth? Some of you are in here and you're trying to grow your company, but you are not able to grow your company because you don't have the right people. To where you want to get to, you are missing one or more key hires. Or worse, Georgia, you've got somebody in one of those seats that shouldn't be there. Either they need to be trained up or they need to be terminated. Or worse, it's you in other roles, in which case you definitely need to be fired from that role. But you're a control freak. I wasn't aimed at you personally, maybe a little bit. So therefore you won't hire somebody to take on that position because you can do the job better. Congratulations. You get to keep the job, Christian. You get to keep the job. Well done. And everything that goes with it. Okay. Now, it's only once you've defined those three that can you actually execute on number 4, which is design the strategy. So the strategy is a solution to solving the problem or the obstacle. Right? But it's got to be diagnosed. All right? You can't diagnose it if you don't know what A and B is. If you don't know where you are and where you're trying to get to, and what's impeding the progress, you cannot define enough. Actually, you can define a strategy, it just won't be very effective. And you'll spend a lot of time rushing around. There's a few people in here that have grown massively and exited, or they've had periods of very significant growth. Oftentimes, in periods of very significant growth, my experience is, I don't want to say easy, but it's a lot, like it feels like everything's just flowing. It's just going and things are taking off. And that's normally because things have got aligned either by design or just by good fortune. You manage to pick the strategy that actually address the obstacle, and all of a sudden there's significant traction rather than feeling like you're pushing a boulder uphill. But you're going to stack the deck in your favor if you've done these first 4 steps. Now, Sam, you can do the first 4 steps and still fall flat on your face. Because a strategy without the appropriate allocation of resources is doomed to fail. What do I mean, allocation of resources? I mean, if you've got an idea but you don't have the people or the money to execute the idea, there's 2 examples of resources to be allocated, capital and people, it's not going to work. Here's where it probably shows up for you, Laura. Business owners often get loads of great ideas, and then we overload our back with our mouths. So we take on 1,000 ideas, and then it just doesn't get enough attention, and it fails to get traction. But then we're reluctant to put it down because we know it's a good idea, but we're also reluctant to put down any one of the other 732 ideas that we got, Jeremy, so it doesn't get traction. And because of our lack of focus on that strategy, it doesn't work. You might as well not have bothered. In fact, often cases, you would have been better not bothering. Hey, do you like my motivational seminar? Okay, so you've got to be really clear. Do you have the resources to execute this? My biggest fight with my senior managers in my businesses on an ongoing basis is deferring what is a good strategy. It's the discipline of saying, no, not now, not now, not now, not now. In fact, last weekend I was in a strategic planning session with a couple of my co-investors and for one of my businesses, and actually it was one of the other investors reminded me of a strategy that I'd wanted to execute about 3 years ago or 2 years ago that I'd been red hot for, and thank God they'd managed to talk me out of it. So much so that the company's doing great, record-breaking profits, in really strong position, and they went, Dan, it's time. And I was like, no, I'm not sure. And so now, ironically, I'm going, no, we're good. But actually, I think they're right because the company's in a different position now. It's now got the resources to be able to take on those strategies, which it didn't. And if I'd done it 2 years ago when I wanted to do it, it would have been a mistake. Right? It's not as simple as just having the idea. Timing is everything. You've got to be uber conscious about these things. And I'm going to say by the end of today, You'll be much clearer. Now, if this was 2 days, we'd dive more into the questions and reflection on it. But if you just took away a lot of these ideas, you have got the tips of some of it. If you go away and work on it and think about it, you can probably develop these. And this is a really great conversation with your senior management team. Okay? This is kind of boardroom type stuff. What we do in our private mastermind is often focused around what is the damn problem. Most of the sessions are about defining what the actual problem is. When you define the problem, it becomes infinitely easier to solve. Most people start out with the wrong definition of the problem. They don't define the problem whatsoever. What do they do instead, Mike? They don't define the problem, they define the symptom. Right? And they go, oh, yeah, oh, the problem is our sales aren't high enough. It's not a problem. It's a symptom. What's the root cause of that? Well, okay, our marketing isn't good enough. Okay, that's not a problem. That's a symptom. What's the cause of the marketing not being good enough? Is it that you haven't got enough people on that job, enough time focused on it? Are the people on the job, OB, just not competent enough? That's when you've got to dig. If it were that easy, you would have done it already. And by the way, that's why I'm evangelical about masterminds. I value tremendously, and I think you should too, getting input from other people with different perspectives than your own. They can see things that you can't. All right? It doesn't make them right. But just constantly living in the echo chamber of your own mind and your own team and just getting the same inputs and outputs about what's right and wrong is probably not helpful. It's useful to step out of that. It's useful to have somebody sometimes down getting your face a little bit and say, you're wrong, that's a mistake, that is fucking stupid. This is a better route. But you've got to be willing to have those conversations, and you've also got to get input from people that have got different perspectives that are potentially credible. Doesn't mean that they're right. Okay? So, these are the first 5. Next 2, which we're talking about later today, in depth. Number 6, recruiting A players. What's the definition of A player? Top 15% of performers by pay bracket. So in parallel universes, if you hired 100 people, Pareto principle would apply. Or in this analogy, top 15%. Anybody in this room hired over their career a good number of salespeople? Anybody done that? Hired sales teams? Okay, a few of you. So if you've got a sales team of 5 people, the top performer probably outperforms the bottom 3 people with his or her sales. Hands down. Okay, some of you in this room know Gabriella. Hands down, best salesperson that I ever hired, ever. That's why I still work with her. Right? Okay. So, how many of your business problems, Grace, would be solved if you just had A players in every seat? How many problems in your business would be solved? And again, it's not saying, I don't have the money to hire them. No, it's relative. If I asked everybody in this room to think of somebody in their career that was worth their weight in gold, a lot of times it's people that are on low or minimum wage. What made them valuable is what they did relative to what they were paid. Okay. How do you get more of those? That's the question. How do you get the A players? If you had A players in every seat, how many of your problems, by show of hands, would go away virtually overnight? Who would significantly improve their business if they just had A players in every seat? Show of hands. Okay. So you've not got a what problem, you've got a who problem. Right? Okay. It's coming up later today, William. And number 7, you could argue is the most important of all. If you go and get A players, do you want to know the way, Laura, to fast-track an A player into being a B or a C player? Good. To my surprise there, a bit too enthusiastic. Put them on a team full of B and C players. If you want to get better, you need to be better. And the easiest way to be better is to surround yourself with people who are playing the game at a slightly higher standard than you. True or false? True. Okay. But if you go and manage to succeed and you hoodwink an A player into coming and working on your mediocre, shitty, low-performing, bitchy team, I assure you that's not going to end well for you or for them, right? They will not drag the culture up. The culture will drag them down. So step number 7 is the culture. And let's break this apart very simply. What is culture? It's the way we treat each other. It's the way that we behave. I like the book that I mentioned to some of the mastermind members recently. It's a crappy book title, but it's a pretty good book. What you do is who you are. Okay? And basically it says culture is how you're behaving. How are you behaving? What's acceptable and not acceptable in your company? It's not a list of fucking values just stuck to the wall. It's what does the company represent? And how does it show up? And how does it reinforce and live those values? Constantly. Okay? And you better be militant on this one, Obi, if you want the company to thrive long term, especially when it grows beyond your line of sight, i.e. when you've got people that are hiring people, right? So you're now not hiring people for your own business. Okay? That message of what the company represents needs to be relayed. Otherwise, you're like any other company. I believe, truthfully, all competitive advantage comes from people and culture. You might say, oh, no, it's innovation. Okay. Who does the bloody innovating? The people and the culture, how you get them to perform. All right? So that's all competitive advantage. So you could say, if you could just do 6 and 7 really, 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 really well, you'd take care of the first 5. Okay. Problem is, it's quite hard to hire something that you don't know what good looks like. And most of you go, what? Actually, I want to grow with the company. Okay, good. You better be upskilling yourself in these areas. You want to do better? You better be better. Best way to be better? Surround yourself with other A players. That's employees, but it's also suppliers. It's also peers. Right? That's the game. They are your 7 jobs. Everything that we're going to talk about for the rest of today feeds into subsets within either this model or the model that went before it. So, questions, thoughts, comments on 7 jobs of a managing director?
Point A would be a CEO and B. So B at any point or?
Oh, good question. I'm going to say both. Ultimately, it's the end vision for the business, okay? But you don't want to just have a 10-year vision for the business and you've got nothing for next year, next quarter, right? There are going to be milestones. But being really clear on the end point is often more helpful than just rolling quarter to quarter to quarter. So strategically, you might set it long term. Tactically, it's going to be all about the next quarter, right? You kind of need both. And that's why if somebody comes at me and is talking all about their vision, normally it's where they're not looking, Obi, is their weak point. So they'll be talking all about their vision. It probably tells me they're not paying enough attention tactically. If they're totally absorbed, Obi, in the tactics of right here, right now in front of their face, it's often that actually they're missing the bigger strategic picture. That make sense? Yep. Good. Good question, Steve. Anybody else? Don't all flood me at once.
Yeah, so what you said earlier about if you're not selling your business, you're just now buying business.
You've just bought it, yeah.
You could apply the same thing to the people that you employ, in that if they're not handing in their notice, then they are committing to growing the business. Just kind of relate to your recruitment of A-based culture. So you would it be appropriate to maybe approach it from that angle with some of your key team? If they're not actively looking to leave, and they need to be thinking along the lines of staying with you for long term and doing what they need to do to grow as a person.
Yeah, I think it's critical to engage them fully. I think unfortunately it's all too easy just for people to hang out in a business. Where I do align with what you said would be to say, if the businesses very rarely stay still. If they're not growing, they're atrophying, and the same is true of every member of the team.
Yeah.
Like, if they are not growing and developing, well, they're not an A player.
Yeah.
That's a better way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
If they are not growing and developing and improving, they're not an A player. If you think of any of the A players that you know, they're people that, because they are typically obsessed with doing the thing optimally. So they're always trying to be better, to improve, to develop, to grow. And so A players, if they're truly A players, it's probably not fair to say they'll drop to be a B and C player. They'll just leave. If they're actually an A player, they'll just leave. If the company is not going where they want it to, they will leave. Right? And that's part of your job as a leader, is to inspire them, because inevitably the company will hit roadblocks on the way. There will be setbacks, etc., etc. It's not like a linear path. So your job is to develop them and keep them aligned with the business, to make sure that they are helping support the growth, and you are actively trying to grow and develop them. Right? That, if you want a company that's not dependent upon you, it's going to be dependent on other people, right? Just right now, I'm in favour of systems. Piss off if you're a hardcore Michael Gerber fan. I do not know a business that exists that doesn't have tremendously good A players on it. Even if you want to use the Michael Gerber McDonald's example, for crying out loud. Do you know how much money the McDonald's CEO is paid? Do you know how much money they spend on the top people in headquarters at McDonald's? It's ludicrous. There's no doubt that that business has an inordinate amount of systems. But it's not the be-all and end-all, especially if you're in a service-based business. I mean, I know McDonald's is renowned for its great quality service and true innovation, but like for most of us, I'm in favour of systems. People are where it is. People design the systems, people implement the systems, people tweak the systems. It's people. How ironic for that. That's my opening session on Systemise and Scale.
It's fair to say, presumably, or is it? So an A player working at one company might not necessarily be an A player when you hire into your business. I'm thinking that's linked to allocation of resources, because I'm thinking, hiring a salesman from a larger competitor comes into my business. He might not be an A player there because he hasn't got the right collateral, he hasn't got the case studies, he asked for all this stuff, or she, whoever it may be, and I can't provide him the sort of resources that they're used to at a previous company. So to me, it's kind of, how do we, I could go out and hire somebody amazing on a stratospheric salary because of based on their past performance for a previous employer, but there's no guarantee that they'll come and do that for me.
That's absolutely true. Yeah. I mean, stratospheric salary, remember, A player is relative to pay. So stratospheric salary does not mean better. No. Okay, but it's also true to say that if you take somebody that performs in one business, there's no guarantee they'll perform in another business. But I think the quote, to give a tribute fairly, is I heard from Tony Robbins. It's not necessarily, A player is a cultural thing. It's not resources, it's resourcefulness. So if it was a salesperson and they don't have the collateral, they'll be less effective. But if they're really an A player, they'll solve the problem. A player salespeople are the ones that are badgering you, and they'll eventually go off and solve the problem themselves. They'll design their own fucking brochure if you won't do it, right? But if you keep that stuff up for long enough, they get pissed off and they leave, because you're now not helping them do what needs to be done. But it's kind of a cultural thing of called, I want this, and I'm going to... A players hit targets is a different way of saying it. An A player, you go, that's the target, that's point B, they go, I've got it, I'm on it, it's going to happen. And they'll make it happen. Or they'll bust a gut trying to make it so. Yep. And that's when you get leverage, because then you do effectively go, I'm giving you resources so I don't have to touch you. I don't need to worry about it. It just happens. Okay?
They're also linked. If they are good and they come in and they be an A player, they massively increase revenues, but in turn will increase profits, and then it will pose you as a business owner issues around allocation of resources. They brought in all this work, now you've got to bloody deliver the stuff, and then there's going to be another pinch point there.
Yeah, 100%. By the way, I like Charlie Munger, who's Warren Buffett's business partner. One of his quotes is, Business isn't easy. Anyone who says it's easy is stupid. And I think because what you've just said is if you get really a real performer in sales and your sales grow significantly, but you don't simultaneously allocate the resources and upskill and develop your operational side of things, it'll go to rat shit. In fact, that's kind of like classic overtrading. A company grows massively and then customer service and experience goes downhill while the company massively tries to hire additional customer service reps, etc., but then they're not very experienced, so they don't do a very good job. Then the company gets a negative experience, then it becomes harder to grow, right? And that's an example of, so you've got to see the full spectrum all the time. If anybody who tells you that it's easy is stupid, because it's an oversimplification, right? Good. All right, so let's take a quick-ish tea and coffee break. Can we say 15 minutes?